Cave diving looks calm and inviting on the surface, but beneath the water, it hides some of the deadliest risks known to man. One wrong choice can turn into a tragedy that no one survives. In the silence of these submerged caverns, beauty and danger live side by side. Divers often find that awe quickly transforms into panic. Over the decades, hundreds of divers have ventured into these caves, chasing adventure or discovery. But not all of them ever found their way back to the surface. Today, we'll uncover some of the most terrifying real cave diving tragedies ever recorded. Each story is a chilling reminder that in the battle between humans and the cave almost always wins. On May 30th, 1999, guide Francis Reyes led a group of 17 people into the cave known as Qua Los Angeles in Puerto Rico. Among them was Elba Vasquez Gonzalez, who would soon face a terrifying ordeal. The group entered shortly after noon, following a stream passage that at first seemed calm and harmless. But far away in the mountains, heavy rains had begun to send water rushing down unseen. As they went deeper, Reyes noticed the stream's flow was getting stronger and more unpredictable. Fearing danger, he decided to lead everyone toward higher ground as the water level rose quickly. The gentle stream soon transformed into a raging current, and panic spread through the group. Reyes urged them to climb a steep, rocky slope toward an upper passage for safety. One by one, people scrambled up, but Vasquez struggled on the slick, wet rocks and suddenly fell. The powerful current swept her downstream, slamming her head against the cave wall and knocking her unconscious. Without hesitation, Reyes jumped into the torrent and fought against the violent water. With one arm, he grabbed Vasquez, while with the other, he clung desperately to the rocks. Exhausted but determined, Reyes dragged her back toward the bottom of the slope. Using his last strength, he lifted her upward and the others pulled her to safety above. But as Reyes tried to climb after her, a massive surge of water thundered through the cave. The wave tore his grip away, and Vasquez, now awake, reached desperately for him. Their hands nearly touched before the current ripped him from sight. In an instant, Reyes was swept deeper into the flooded cave beyond anyone's reach. The survivors were guided to a dry chamber where they waited through the night shaken and silent. Vasquez sat apart from the group, weeping for the man who had saved her life. Rescuers arrived at dawn but struggled with the high water and narrow passages. By hours later, the trapped group was finally led to safety. Vasquez was taken to the hospital but recovered well from her injuries. Tragically, that same day, rescuers recovered the body of Francis Reyes downstream. On October 14, 2022, a team of skilled cave divers prepared to explore the underwater passages of Roaring River Cave in Missouri. Their mission required special equipment and strict coordination. Among them was 27-year-old Eric Hahn, paired with a diver named Marty. Their task was to place emergency air tanks at 130 feet and 190 feet deep to ensure safety. Han relied on a rebreather, a device that recycles air by removing carbon dioxide and adding oxygen. This allowed him to dive longer than with a standard tank. At 11:12 a.m., Han entered the water and began following the safety guideline into the cave. Darkness and cold surrounded him as only his dive lights lit the way. 12 minutes later, Han reached 190 feet and seemed fine when meeting another diver. But only a minute later, something went terribly wrong. Han suddenly collided with Marty and began ascending rapidly in panic. Rapid ascent at such depth is extremely dangerous and can cause serious injury. Marty chased after him and caught up when Han slammed into the rocky ceiling at 165 feet. Han struggled violently with his rebreather system. In desperation, Han pulled out his mouthpiece without closing it properly. Water rushed into the device, making the emergency worse. His body convulsed with the symptoms of oxygen poisoning. Marty tried to hold him steady while managing the equipment, but the situation spiraled out of control. Both men sank to 204 feet as their struggle stirred up clouds of silt from the cave floor. The water became so cloudy that the safety line disappeared from view. Marty, exhausted and running low on air, realized he could not save Han in those conditions. He reluctantly let go and swam upward toward safety. Another diver tried to descend to help, but faced the same problems. Cloudy water
but
distance
encountered
from
the same
guideline and
issues.
dangerous oxygen levels made rescue impossible. Just 23 minutes after entering, Han was no longer with the team. Marty surfaced without him, and the surface manager called off any further rescue attempts. At 4 p.m., nearly 5 hours later, the Missouri Highway Patrol diving team arrived to recover Han. They found his body around 200 feet deep. Investigators noted his backup mouthpiece was in place but leaking slightly. His tanks still had air, proving he hadn't run out of oxygen. Experts concluded Hahn had miscalculated his gas mix with too little helium and too much oxygen. The error left him vulnerable to narcosis and oxygen poisoning. On February 9, 2019, two Italian divers, Carlo Basso and Carlo Barbieri, entered the El Dudu Cave in the Dominican Republic. The underwater system was famous for its beauty, but also for its deadly maze-like passages. Neither diver had proper cave diving training, relying only on open water experience. This decision would soon prove fatal. At 11:50 a.m., they began their dive, and at first, everything seemed normal. The water was clear and their lights cut easily through the darkness. But as they swam deeper, the passages grew narrower and more complex. Then they made a crucial mistake. They left the main guideline. The side passage quickly became a trap as their fins stirred up fine silt from the cave floor. Within seconds, visibility dropped to nearly zero. Their flashlights bounced off the thick cloud of particles, leaving them blind and disoriented. Panic started to build as they searched for direction. Basso's front air tank soon got tangled in the cave line. He struggled to free himself, but the rope snapped, cutting off their only path to safety. Now lost in the maze, both divers breathed faster and burned through their air supply. Every movement stirred up more silt, making escape impossible. Hours later, rescuers entered the cave and discovered the broken guideline. They followed it into a narrow, murky passage, but had to turn back without success. On February 12th, 3 days later, rescuers located Barbieri's body in a tight passage. His gear still worked, suggesting he had simply run out of air. The body was stuck so tightly that even professional divers struggled to reach it. They made the painful decision to leave him there temporarily. After nearly 2 weeks, experts Ed Sorensen and Mike Young were called in. With special equipment, they managed to push deeper than the local teams. Finally, they discovered Basso's body further down the same passage. Both divers had been trapped in spaces so tight that rescue had been nearly impossible. On May 11, 1990, Michael Spears, 25, and Daniel, 34, prepared to dive into Deep Hole Sink 2 in Florida. Despite recent rains clouding the water, they decided to continue their dive. Michael was newly certified with just 5 months of cave diving experience. Daniel, on the other hand, was a seasoned diver with more than 10 years underwater. The two entered the narrow entrance and descended into the cave. By the time they reached the junction room, the water had become murky. With visibility almost gone, they relied heavily on the thin guideline. At the upper circuit line, the water cleared slightly and gave them some confidence. They signaled each other and kept going deeper. But as they passed 200 feet, breathing became heavier and slower. Nitrogen narcosis began to set in like drunken confusion. Michael's movements grew strange and less controlled. Suddenly, he drifted below the guideline, sinking faster as if pulled by an invisible force. Daniel noticed and tried to catch up. The pair entered the junction room again, but now visibility dropped to zero. Michael reached for the line twice and missed both times. Disoriented, he turned the wrong way and swam deeper into the cave instead of out. Daniel lost sight of him immediately in the cloudy water. Michael thought he had found the line, but it led him into a dead-end chamber called the downstream ballroom. The depth worsened, his breathing carbon dioxide built up, and his vision began to fade. His buoyancy failed and he started to sink. Eventually, he blacked out completely before reaching the bottom. Daniel, forced to continue alone, began his required decompression stops. When Daniel surfaced, he realized Michael hadn't returned. Rescue divers soon entered the cave to search. After hours of careful searching, they found Michael face down at 241 feet deep. His regulator was still in his mouth and his tank was half full. The details revealed he had succumbed to narcosis and blackout, not a lack of air. The rescue team brought his body back to the surface after a 7-hour operation. On March 31, 2012, 29-year-old diver Marcin Kay joined the CAST underwater research team to map Wikiwatchi Springs in Florida. The caves were deep, dark, and filled with hidden dangers. Kay was experienced and trusted by his team. Together, they entered the water to begin their exploration. At depths over 100 feet, the divers followed the guideline carefully. The cave was pitch dark, with only their lights piercing the water. They moved slowly to avoid nitrogen building up in their blood. Every signal was made with precision to keep the team coordinated. By late afternoon, the team turned back toward the cave exit. Kay stayed close to the line as they ascended. But around 4:30 p.m., he suddenly veered away from the guideline. Without warning, he swam up into a narrow crack in the rock. His movements became erratic, and he ignored the warning signals from his teammates. They flashed their lights and tapped him, but nothing worked. Kay forced his way deeper into the crack, twisting his body to fit through. The space was far too tight for a diver with tanks. After 5 agonizing minutes, his regulator slipped from his mouth. Bubbles rose as he struggled without air. Rescue divers tried desperately to reach him, but the crack was too narrow. Kay was wedged too deep to be pulled back easily. By the time they reached him, he was unresponsive. His tanks still had air, but his life was already gone. Investigators later explained the cause an arterial gas embolism. The rapid ascent had sent an air bubble into his brain, clouding his judgment. On September 22, 1996, 2 friends, Jake Miller and Lisa Carter, entered Paradise Springs, Florida, ready for an underwater cave dive. They had no formal cave diving training and carried no safety line. At first, everything felt calm as they descended 60 feet into the cave. Their flashlights cut through the dark water, illuminating the rocky passage. Jake swam ahead confidently with Lisa close behind. The tunnel narrowed as they moved deeper into the cave. At 148 feet, they had gone much farther than planned. Still, curiosity pushed them to continue. Suddenly, Jake's fins stirred up silt from the cave floor. Within seconds, the water turned cloudy and their lights became useless. Lisa reached out to grab Jake, but couldn't find him in the murky darkness. Panic surged through both divers as they lost sight of each other. Jake groped blindly in the dark, breathing heavily and burning through his air. His hand found a narrow crack in the rock, and he tried to squeeze through. His tank and straps jammed in the tight opening, pinning him against the stone. He was trapped, unable to move. Lisa, terrified, thought the cave might be collapsing. She made a desperate choice to retreat to the surface for help. Meanwhile, Jake's chest pressed against the rock as his air ran low. He struggled to unclip his straps, fighting against time. Finally, he wriggled free from his gear, leaving the tank behind. Now, without air, he swam upward into total darkness. Rescue divers arrived within an hour and entered the silty cave. They followed the path until they discovered Jake's body. His regulator was gone and his body floated lifeless at 144 feet. Investigators later concluded he had suffered an arterial gas embolism after surfacing too quickly without air. Lisa survived, but admitted they underestimated the dangers. The tragedy became a lasting warning about the risks of entering caves unprepared. These tragedies remind us how breathtaking yet deadly caves can be, especially when divers are unprepared or push beyond their limits. Each story carries the same warning: respect the environment, or it may cost your life. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of human courage, mistakes, and survival. Your support helps us keep bringing these powerful lessons to light.